I never wanted to go to that damn dinner. Corporate events are my personal hell. Fake smiles, forced small talk, and everyone sizing each other up like sharks circling prey. But Melissa insisted. It's important for my career, Thomas. Just one night. Please? That one night changed everything. My name's Thomas Reed. For the past 5 years, I've been known around New York's financial district simply as Melissa's husband. The guy who shows up at Haven Capital functions in a slightly ill-fitting suit, nursing a whiskey at the bar while his superstar wife works the room. The man who apparently has nothing better to do than tag along to his wife's events. If they only knew. The Grand Sterling Hotel ballroom was exactly what you'd expect. Crystal chandeliers, waiters in tuxedos floating between tables with champagne trays, and the constant hum of ambition disguised as conversation. Haven Capital spared no expense for their annual investor gala. Why would they? With quarterly profits up 22%, they had plenty to celebrate. Try to mingle a bit tonight, Melissa said, straightening my tie in the elevator. She was stunning in her navy blue dress, hair pulled back in that severe style she adopted when she made VP of Acquisitions. Alan specifically asked if you were coming. Alan Brooks, Haven Capital's CEO, and the man who'd been working my wife 80 hours a week for the past 3 years. I'd met him twice before. Both times he'd looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his Italian leather shoes. Did he now? I said, raising an eyebrow. And why would the great Alan Brooks care if I showed up? Melissa sighed, that familiar sigh that said I was being difficult again. Because he's my boss, and it's polite. Just be nice, okay? This promotion to executive VP is almost mine. Don't what? Don't be you. The elevator doors opened before I could respond, saving us both from the argument that was brewing. Melissa plastered on her corporate smile and stepped out, instantly transforming into Haven Capital Melissa. Confident, ambitious, untouchable. I followed behind just as I was expected to. The evening started predictably enough. Melissa introduced me around to people whose names I immediately forgot. I shook hands, nodded at appropriate intervals, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I was playing my part perfectly. The supportive husband who knows his place. 2 hours and 3 whiskeys in, I was counting the minutes until we could leave when Melissa pulled me toward a group gathered near the stage. Thomas, you remember Carter Wilson from legal? She said, gesturing to a tall man with 2 white teeth and the kind of tan that comes from regular appointments rather than actual sun exposure. Carter. Of course I remembered Carter. At last year's Christmas party, he'd cornered me by the bathrooms to explain in excruciating detail why his Porsche was superior to every other car on the road. He'd also made it abundantly clear that he found it fascinating that Melissa had married someone like me. Carter, I nodded, extending my hand. His grip was too tight, the handshake of a man with something to prove. The elusive husband emerges from his cave, he laughed, looking around at his colleagues for approval. They obliged with chuckles. We were beginning to think Melissa made you up. Just busy with my own work, I replied neutrally. Carter snorted. Right. Melissa mentioned you're between jobs right now? I felt Melissa stiffen beside me. She hadn't mentioned any such thing, because it wasn't true. But before I could correct him, another man from the group chimed in. What is it you do again, Thomas? He asked, swirling his martini with practiced indifference. He's consulting, Melissa jumped in quickly. In the tech sector. I turned to look at her. Consulting? Is that what we're calling it now? A flash of warning in her eyes. Thomas has been taking some time to explore his options after leaving his last position, she explained to the group. This was news to me. In reality, I had been working 16-hour days for the past 8 months on a project that was about to change everything. But apparently in Melissa's revised history, I was some sort of unemployed deadbeat. Carter's eyes lit up like I just handed him a gift. Oh, exploring options. That's what my brother-in-law calls it too. Been exploring from his couch for 2 years now. More laughter from the group. I felt a slow burn starting in my chest. Not anger, something colder, more calculated. I'd built my first company facing much worse than these corporate peacocks. Their contempt was nothing new. How long have you been Exploring, Thomas? Asked a woman whose name tag identified her as the director of marketing. Too long, apparently, I smiled tightly. Carter was fully in his element now, an apex predator who'd spotted weakness. He loosened his tie slightly and leaned in. The smell of expensive scotch wafted from him. So, Thomas, he said loudly enough that heads from nearby groups turned our way. How does it feel? How does what feel? I asked, though I knew exactly where this was going. To be a loser, he finished, his voice carrying across the now quieting room. To sit at home while your wife pays the bills. To be the charity case at her table. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt dozens of eyes on me, pitying, almost embarrassed. But it was the sound that came next that truly froze me to the spot. Melissa laughed. It was brief, just a nervous titter that she quickly covered with a cough, but unmistakable. My wife, the woman I'd supported through law school, the woman whose dreams I'd funded when no one else would touch her business plan, had just laughed at the suggestion that I was a loser. Carter, emboldened by her reaction, continued, I mean, seriously, what do you do all day? Video games and beer while Melissa's out there killing it? Must be nice to have a sugar mama. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Alan Brooks, who had wandered over to witness the spectacle, wore an amused smirk. I looked at Melissa, giving her one chance to defend me, to say something, anything that would indicate she didn't share their assessment. She met my eyes briefly, then looked away, taking a large sip of her champagne. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The careful compartmentalization I'd maintained between my life with Melissa and my actual work collapsed. 5 years of playing the supportive husband while she built her career on the back of my silent investment evaporated in an instant. I set my whiskey down carefully on a nearby table and straightened my shoulders. You know, Carter, I said, my voice steady and carrying easily in the hushed room, that's a fascinating question. How does it feel to be a loser? Carter's smirk widened. He thought I was about to embarrass myself further. I turned to Alan Brooks. Alan, perhaps you could answer that question better than I could. How does it feel to run a company that's actually owned by a loser like me? The smirk on Alan's face faltered. I'm sorry. Oh, didn't Melissa tell you? I continued pleasantly, as though we were discussing the weather. I suppose she couldn't, since she doesn't know herself. But Haven Capital's largest shareholder, the one who owns 75% of your company through various shell corporations, that would be me. The champagne glass in Melissa's hand crashed to the floor. No one moved to clean it up. All eyes were fixed on me, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror. That's not possible, Alan managed, his face draining of color. Our largest shareholder is Orion Holdings, and they're a subsidiary of Reed Ventures, I finished for him, which is wholly owned by me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to him. Thomas Reed, CEO of Reed Ventures and majority owner of Haven Capital. Pleasure to finally introduce myself properly. Alan stared at the card like it might bite him. His hands were visibly shaking. I turned back to Carter, whose face had gone from flushed with alcohol to ashen. To answer your question, Carter, being a loser feels remarkably like watching a man insult his boss without realizing it. I'd imagine it's similar to how you're feeling right now. The silence was absolute. I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. I looked at Melissa, whose expression had transformed from embarrassment to shock to something approaching terror. Honey, I think I've had enough socializing for one night. I have an early meeting tomorrow with my lawyers, about Haven Capital, actually. Fascinating coincidence. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked toward the exit. As I reached the doors, I couldn't resist one parting shot. I turned back to the still frozen crowd. By the way, Alan Wassam, we should discuss those creative accounting practices you've been using for the offshore accounts. My auditors found some discrepancies that make for interesting reading. See you in the boardroom. The doors closed behind me, cutting off the explosion of voices that erupted in my wake. In the blessed quiet of the hotel corridor, I pulled out my phone and dialed. It's done, I said when the call connected. Plan B tomorrow morning. Sarah Gold's voice came through, crisp and professional as always. Everything's ready, Mr. Reed. The board members have been notified of the emergency session. Legal has the paperwork prepared. And the evidence? All documented and ready to present. Alan doesn't stand a chance. I smiled. Sarah had been my eyes and ears inside Haven Capital for 2 years. A brilliant financial analyst whose talents had been consistently overlooked by Alan and his boys' club leadership. She'd been the one to discover their embezzlement scheme, carefully documenting every fraudulent transaction, while they dismissed her as just another ambitious young woman who didn't understand how things worked. "See you tomorrow then," I said. "And Sarah, good work." I hung up and walked to the elevator, feeling lighter than I had in years. The charade was finally over. I met Melissa 5 years ago at a tech conference in San Francisco. I just sold my first company, Orion Tech, for an amount that still seemed surreal to me. After years of ramen noodles and sleeping on friends' couches while building my startup, I suddenly had more money than I knew what to do with. Melissa was working for a small investment firm then, hungry and passionate about changing the financial world. We connected over late-night conversations about business ethics and the future of technology. When she talked about her dreams of revolutionizing how investment firms operated, of creating more opportunities for small businesses to access capital, I was captivated. 3 months later, when she told me about a struggling firm called Haven Capital that had the infrastructure she needed but was on the verge of bankruptcy, I saw an opportunity, not just to help the woman I was falling for, but to do something meaningful with my new wealth. "I could get you a meeting with them," I offered. "I know some people." What I didn't tell her was that those people were actually my own lawyers, setting up a complex ownership structure that would allow me to buy controlling interest in Haven Capital while keeping my name off the public records. Why the secrecy? I'd learned the hard way with my first influx of wealth that money changes how people see you and how they treat you. Suddenly, everyone wanted something. Family members I hadn't heard from in years needed loans. Women were interested in me who wouldn't have given me a second glance before. Business proposals landed in my inbox from morning till night. I wanted Melissa to love me, not for my bank account. So I kept quiet about the extent of my wealth and involvement in Haven Capital, instead playing the role of supportive boyfriend and then husband as she climbed the corporate ladder there. The plan was never to keep it secret forever, just until our relationship was solid enough that the money wouldn't matter. But as years passed, the right moment never seemed to come. And as Melissa changed, becoming harder, more ambitious, more absorbed in the corporate world I'd grown to despise during my Orion Tech days, I began to wonder if there would ever be a right time. Meanwhile, I started new ventures, worked remotely, and let her believe my projects were modest consulting gigs rather than the multi-million-dollar deals they actually were. I kept my name out of the press and operated through holding companies and proxies. To the world, and to my wife, I was just Thomas Reed, unremarkable husband of rising star Melissa Reed, until tonight. I didn't go home after leaving the gala. Instead, I went to my office, my real office, not the small study in our penthouse where Melissa thought I occasionally consulted. The Reed Ventures headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek building in Midtown, accessible by a private elevator that required biometric authentication. As I entered, the night security guard nodded respectfully. "Evening, Mr. Reed." "Evening, Joe. Going to be a late one tonight. Anything I can get for you, sir?" I shook my head. "Just some privacy. Big day tomorrow." In my office, I loosened my tie and poured myself a proper drink from the bar cart in the corner. The space was minimal but comfortable, all glass and brushed steel with views of the city that still took my breath away sometimes. Success had its perceptions. I sat at my desk and pulled up the files Sarah had compiled over the past year. The evidence was damning. Alan Brooks and several other executives had been siphoning money from Haven Capital into personal accounts through an elaborate scheme involving fake consultancy firms and inflated contracts. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. What had started as my gift to Melissa, buying Haven Capital to give her a platform for her ambitions, had turned into something else entirely. The company had drifted from its original mission under Alan's leadership, becoming just another cutthroat investment firm focused on short-term profits over sustainable growth. And Melissa had changed with it. The woman who once talked passionately about ethical investing now boasted about hostile takeovers over dinner. The person who wanted to help small businesses now specialized in dismantling them for parts. Somewhere along the way, she'd become the very thing she once despised. and I'd funded it all. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, Melissa, of course. Where are you? We need to talk. What the hell was that? Thomas, please come home. You're being ridiculous. If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. I set the phone aside without responding. There would be time for that conversation later. Tonight I had work to do. By 3 a.m., everything was in place. Emails had been sent to all board members about the emergency session. Security had been briefed about the changes coming to access protocols. Sarah had distributed the evidence packets to our allies on the board. There was no going back now. Only then did I head home, ready to face whatever awaited me there. The penthouse was dark when I arrived, but I knew Melissa was awake. I could feel her presence in the stillness, like an electrical charge in the air before a storm. She was sitting in the living room, still in her evening dress, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table in front of her. When I turned on the light, she squinted up at me, her makeup smudged and her eyes red-rimmed. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. I nodded, setting my keys on the entry table. "Every word." "You own Haven Capital?" 75% of it, yes." She shook her head as if trying to clear it. "And you never thought to mention this small detail to your wife? The person who's been working there for 5 years?" "The person who laughed when her colleagues called me a loser?" I countered, my voice sharper than I had intended. Melissa flinched. "I didn't laugh." "Yes, you did. Just a little chuckle, but it was enough. It told me everything I needed to know about how you see me." "That's not fair. I was nervous. Carter was being an ass and I didn't know how to react. It was just a nervous laugh." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Our reflection was superimposed over the skyline. Melissa on the couch, small and hunched. Me standing apart, separate. It seemed appropriate. "Do you know why I bought Haven Capital?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. "Because you loved it. Because you had this vision for what it could be, a force for good in the financial world. You were so passionate about it, Melissa. You wanted to change things." "I still do," she protested weakly. I turned to face her. "No, you don't. You haven't for a long time. Now you're just another shark in a sea of sharks, circling for the kill. And worse, you're helping Alan Brooks steal from the company while doing it." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" "The offshore accounts, the fake consultancy contracts, the embezzlement scheme that's been going on for at least 2 years." I watched her carefully. "Please tell me you didn't know." Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. Guilt, fear, surprise. Then it was gone, replaced by indignation. "Of course I didn't know. How could you think I would be involved in something like that?" I wanted to believe her. Part of me still did, but I'd seen too many financial reports, too many suspicious transactions that had passed through her department. "There's going to be a board meeting tomorrow," I said instead of answering her question. "Alan is out. So are most of the executive team. We're cleaning house." Melissa stood up suddenly, swaying slightly from the wine. "You can't do that." "I can, and I am. Haven Capital is going back to its original mission, the one you used to believe in." "This is about me, isn't it?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You're punishing me because of what happened tonight. Because of one stupid laugh that didn't mean anything." I studied her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved enough to buy a company for, whose dreams I'd funded, whose career I'd silently supported. When had she become this person I barely recognized? "No, Melissa, this isn't about you or us or what happened tonight. This is about doing what's right. Haven Capital has lost its way, and I'm going to fix that." "By firing everyone? By destroying what we've built?" "What we've built?" I repeated incredulously. "Melissa, you didn't even know I owned the company until tonight. You've been taking credit for a success that was handed to you, working at a company that was bought for you." Her face contorted with anger. "So that's what this is really about. Your ego. You couldn't stand that I was successful on my own, so you have to come in and remind me that it was all because of you, the big strong man behind the scenes, pulling the strings." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "If I cared about credit, don't you think I would have taken it somewhere in the past 5 years? I stayed silent because I wanted you to feel like your success was your own." I wanted you to be happy. Well, congratulations, she spat. I was happy until you decided to blow everything up tonight. Do you have any idea what you've done? How am I supposed to face anyone at work now? And there it was, the crux of it all. Not concern about the company's future or the allegations of fraud or even the state of our marriage. Just how this would affect her image. That's your concern right now? Your reputation? It's my life, Thomas. The life I've spent years building. On a foundation of lies, I said quietly. And not even your lies. Mine. Lies I told to protect your feelings, to give you space to grow. But you didn't grow, Melissa. You just became another version of Alan Brooks. She slapped me. The sound cracked through the quiet apartment like a gunshot. I didn't move, didn't raise a hand to my stinging cheek. Just looked at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. Get out, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. This is my apartment, I reminded her gently. My name is on the deed, like the company, and the car you drive, and the clothes you are wearing, all provided by the loser you married. Her face crumpled, anger giving way to something more calculated. Tears welled in her eyes, tears I might have once moved mountains to stop. Thomas, please. I'm sorry about tonight. We can work this out. We've always been a team. Have we, I asked? Because from where I'm standing, teams don't laugh when one member is being humiliated. Teams defend each other. I made a mistake, she pleaded, reaching for my hand. One stupid, meaningless mistake. Don't throw away 5 years because of it. I pulled my hand away. It wasn't meaningless, Melissa. It was revealing. And it wasn't just tonight. It's been happening slowly in small ways for years. Tonight just finally opened my eyes to it. She stared at me, her expression hardening as she realized the tears weren't working. So that's it? You're just going to destroy everything? Not everything, just the parts that need destroying. Haven Capital will be better for it, more ethical, more like what you used to want it to be. I paused. As for us, I think we both need some time to figure out who we really are and what we want. What does that mean? It means I'll be staying at my other apartment for a while. You can remain here until you find a new place. Her eyes widened. You have another apartment? I have many things you don't know about, Melissa. That's the problem, isn't it? You thought you knew who I was, the supportive husband who stayed in the background while you shined. But that was just one part of me. There's a lot more you never bothered to see. I walked to our bedroom and quickly packed an overnight bag. When I returned to the living room, Melissa hadn't moved. She stood frozen, as if her reality was still rearranging itself around her. The board meeting is at 9, I said, heading for the door. You don't need to attend. In fact, it would be better if you didn't. Am I? She swallowed hard. Are you firing me too? I paused with my hand on the doorknob. That depends on whether you were involved in the fraud. If you were, then yes, absolutely. If not, I shrugged. That's a conversation for another day. Thomas, she called as I opened the door. I do love you. That part was never a lie. I looked back at her, beautiful, ambitious Melissa, who had once been everything I wanted. Perhaps she did love me in her way, but it wasn't enough anymore. Goodbye, Melissa. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that somehow sounded more final than a slam would have. The Haven Capital boardroom was silent as the last slide of Sarah's presentation faded from the screen. 14 men and women sat around the polished table, expressions ranging from shock to outrage to resignation. Alan Brooks sat at the far end opposite me, his face a mask of controlled fury. This is a witch hunt, he said finally, breaking the silence. These so-called irregularities have perfectly reasonable explanations. Such as, I asked mildly? Such as standard business practices that someone with your background might not understand. A few nervous laughs around the table. Alan was trying to rally support, reminding the board that I was an outsider, a tech guy who didn't understand their world. My background includes founding and selling a billion-dollar tech company, serving on the boards of 7 Fortune 500 companies, and personally overseeing investments worth more than Haven Capital's entire portfolio, I said, keeping my tone conversational. But please enlighten me about these standard business practices that involve moving company funds to personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Alan's jaw tightened. Those accounts are investment vehicles for your yacht, Sarah cut in, advancing to a new slide that showed photographs of Alan's recently acquired 120-foot luxury vessel, and your house in Provence, and your daughter's wedding last summer, which cost just under what Haven reported as consulting fees to Brookline Associates, a company that, coincidentally, consists of nothing but a P.O. box registered to your brother-in-law. More photographs appeared on screen: the French villa, the lavish wedding, irrefutable evidence that company money had funded Alan's extravagant lifestyle. One of the board members, an older woman named Margaret Whelan, who had always been skeptical of Alan's leadership, leaned forward. "Is this true, Alan?" His silence was answer enough. I stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the majority shareholder of Haven Capital, I called this meeting for two reasons. First, to address the fraud that has been occurring under the current leadership. And second, to chart a new course for this company, one that returns to the principles upon which it was founded. I outlined my vision for Haven Capital: a return to ethical investing, a focus on supporting promising small businesses rather than dismantling them, a commitment to transparency and accountability. To that end, I concluded, I am asking for your support in removing Alan Brooks as CEO, effective immediately, along with any executives who participated in or had knowledge of the fraudulent activities detailed today." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 9 of the 14 board members voted to terminate Alan and launch a full investigation into the fraud. The others abstained, unwilling to openly support him, but also unwilling to condemn him outright. Corporate politics at its finest. As security escorted a shell-shocked Alan from the boardroom, I turned to the remaining board members. "Now we need to appoint an interim CEO while we conduct a proper search for new leadership." Margaret Whelan spoke up again. "Do you intend to take the position yourself, Mr. Reed?" I shook my head. "No, my expertise lies elsewhere, and I believe in having the right person for the job." I gestured to Sarah, who sat quietly to my right. "I would like to nominate Sarah Gold as interim CEO." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Sarah herself looked stunned. "Ms. Gold is currently a senior analyst," one of the board members pointed out. "That's quite a leap to CEO." "Ms. Gold has been with Haven Capital for 5 years," I countered. "She understands its operations intimately. More importantly, she was the one who uncovered the fraud we've been discussing, showing both integrity and acumen. She has an MBA from Wharton and previously worked at Goldman Sachs. I believe she is more than qualified." There was skepticism, of course. Questions about her experience, her age, 34, younger than most of the board members, her readiness for such responsibility. Sarah answered each question with the calm confidence I'd come to expect from her, laying out her vision for Haven Capital's future that aligned perfectly with what I just presented. In the end, the vote was closer, but still in our favor. Sarah Gold would be the new interim CEO of Haven Capital, with a 6-month trial period before the board would vote on making the appointment permanent. As the meeting adjourned and board members filed out, many stopping to congratulate Sarah or introduce themselves properly for the first time, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Haven Capital could become what it was always meant to be, what Melissa had once dreamed it would be. Sarah approached me as the room emptied. "Mr. Reed, I don't know how to thank you. You earned this, Sarah. I'm just sorry it took so long." She smiled, a genuine smile, not the corporate mask I'd grown tired of seeing. "What happens now? With the investigation, I mean?" "The authorities have already been notified. The evidence will be turned over to them. As for Haven Capital, that's up to you now." I extended my hand. "Congratulations, CEO Gold." As we shook hands, Sarah surprised me by leaning in and placing a quick kiss on my cheek. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did," she whispered. Just then, the boardroom door slammed open with such force that the handle dented the wall. Melissa stood there, her face twisted with rage, mascara streaking down her cheeks like black war paint. The perfect corporate wife facade had completely shattered. "You fucking backstabbing piece of shit!" she screamed, her voice bouncing off the walls. "I saw that. How long have you two been screwing behind my back? Sarah stepped back, eyes wide with shock. Ms. Reed, that's completely inappropriate. Shut your goddamn mouth, you scheming little tramp! Melissa hurled her purse across the room, narrowly missing Sarah's head before smashing into a frame company award, sending glass shards everywhere. You think I'm stupid? The texts, the late nights, the convenient business meetings? I moved between them, my voice deadly calm. That's enough, Melissa. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? She laughed, a high, unhinged sound that made the security guard peek in through the door. You want embarrassing? How about your new CEO knowing you're nothing but a control freak with daddy issues who buys companies to feel powerful? Miss Reed, Sarah said firmly, security is right outside. If you can't control yourself, he's using you, Melissa spat, pointing a trembling finger, just like he used me. He builds you up just to control you. That's his game. Ask him about the other companies he's bought. Ask him about the other women he's mentored. I turned to Sarah. Give us a moment. She nodded, shooting a wary glance at Melissa before leaving. When the door closed, I faced my wife. So this is what you've become. She stalked toward me, jabbing a manicured finger into my chest. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. 5 fucking years of my life wasted on a lie. I humiliated you? I grabbed her wrist, twisting it away from my chest. You laughed when your colleague called me a loser. You stood there smirking while they mocked me. One stupid laugh, she shrieked, trying to pull her arm free. And for that, you destroy everything I've built. You built? I released her wrist with a small shove that sent her stumbling back. The career I handed you on a silver platter? The one you built by stepping on anyone in your way and selling out every principle you claim to have? Her hand flew at my face, but this time I caught it midair. Don't even think about it. I made Haven what it is, she hissed, her face inches from mine. Me, not you sitting in your secret office playing billionaire. Gah. I put in the hours, the blood, sweat, and tears, and took credit for success that wasn't yours, I countered. Tell me something, Melissa. Did you know about the fraud? Because my investigators found some very interesting transfers from those offshore accounts to a separate one in your name. Her face went white beneath her makeup. That's a lie. I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank statements. $300,000 wired to an account in the Caymans. Your name, your signature. Want to explain that? Alan said it was a bonus, she whispered, her bravado faltering, for special projects. Completely legitimate. A secret bonus wired to an offshore account? Did you report it on your taxes? The look on her face told me everything. That's what I thought. She collapsed into a chair, mascara-stained tears dripping onto her silk blouse. You're going to ruin me. No, Melissa, you ruined yourself the moment you decided that power and status were more important than basic decency. The moment you looked at me with contempt instead of respect. She looked up, eyes puffy but calculating. Please, Thomas, we can fix this. I'll change. I promise. Remember how it was in the beginning? The pathetic attempt at manipulation made my skin crawl. There's nothing to fix. Divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. I'm keeping the company. You can have the penthouse and the art collection. Divorce? Her voice cracked. Just like that? 5 years and you're throwing it all away? It was already gone, I said flatly. Has been for years. We've both just been too stubborn to admit it. She stood suddenly, wobbling slightly on her designer heels, her face transforming into an ugly sneer. You think you've won, that you can just discard me and move on with your little analyst whore? There's nothing between Sarah and me, I said coldly. But even if there was, it would be none of your business anymore. You'll regret this, she spat, reaching for her phone. When I'm done telling everyone what kind of man you really are. Careful, I cut her off. Those offshore accounts, one word from me, and the authorities will be looking at you as a co-conspirator rather than an innocent bystander. How would your precious reputation survive that? Her mouth snapped shut. That's what I thought. I walked to the door. Farewell, Melissa. For good this time. Thomas, she called, desperation in her voice. Please, I love you. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, not bothering to turn around. No, you don't. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. I left her there, surrounded by the broken glass from the shattered award, a fitting symbol of what our marriage had become. I was barely back in my office when my phone rang. It was Derek, head of building security. Mr. Reed, we have a situation. Your wife, Mrs. Reed, she's in the executive lounge and she's creating a scene. What kind of scene? His voice lowered. She's drunk, sir. She's telling everyone about your personal business. And she's threatening to burn the whole goddamn place down if security tries to remove her. I sighed. I'm on my way. The executive lounge was on the 40th floor, a luxurious space with panoramic views of the city, usually reserved for client meetings and celebrating major deals. Today it was the stage for Melissa's meltdown. I could hear her before I even opened the door. You all think you know him, Thomas Reed, the great savior? Her voice was slurred but loud. Let me tell you who he really is. I entered to find about 20 employees frozen in place, watching the spectacle with horrified fascination. Melissa stood on a coffee table, champagne bottle in hand, designer suit rumpled, hair falling from its perfect arrangement. He uses people, she was saying, gesturing wildly and sloshing champagne onto the carpet. Builds them up just to control them. Ask his first wife. Oh, wait, you can't, because she signed an NDA after he... Melissa, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the room. That's enough. She whirled toward me, nearly losing her balance. Well, speak of the devil, The employees began edging toward the exits. I nodded at them. Everyone out, now. They didn't need to be told twice. Within seconds, only Melissa, myself, and 2 security guards remained. You're making a fool of yourself, I said quietly. Am I? She laughed, taking another swig from the bottle. Or am I finally telling the truth? Your precious employees should know who they're really working for. I don't have a first wife, Melissa. You know that. Details, she waved dismissively. But they should know about the other companies, the other women. Tell them about Amanda from Orion Tech, or Jennifer from both successful CEOs now, I finished for her. Both of whom I mentored and invested in because they were talented, nothing more. Bullshit! She hurled the champagne bottle at me. I ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind me. You were sleeping with both of them. No, Melissa, that's your pattern, not mine. Sleeping your way to the top. Isn't that how you got your first promotion at Hudson Financial? With Michael Carter, your boss who was married with 3 kids? Her face went slack with shock. How did you? I do my research. Always have. I knew about your history when I met you. I just chose to believe you'd changed. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they seemed genuine. Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing anything to you. This is the consequence of your own actions. I turned to the security guards. Escort Miss Reed to her office. She has 30 minutes to collect her personal belongings. Then escort her out of the building. You can't fire me, she shrieked as the guards approached. I just did. On what grounds? Creating a hostile work environment. Armand, corporate espionage. Financial fraud. Take your pick. As the guards gently but firmly helped her down from the table, she fixed me with a venomous glare. This isn't over, Thomas. Yes, it is. I walked away without looking back. The media explosion was immediate and merciless. Haven Capital scandal, CEO ousted, fraud allegations surface, blared across business channels. Tech billionaire reveals secret ownership of financial giant, proclaimed the Wall Street Journal. My carefully cultivated anonymity was shattered overnight. But the most scandalous headlines came 3 days later. Haven VP caught with pants down in company apartment. Apparently, Melissa had been having an affair with Carter Wilson for the past 8 months. The same Carter who'd publicly humiliated me at the gala. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Security cameras in the company's executive apartment had caught them in an extremely compromising position the night after the board meeting. Melissa had sought comfort in familiar arms after our confrontation. Carter, sensing which way the wind was blowing, immediately threw her under the bus, claiming she had been the one to initiate both the affair and discussions about the offshore accounts. She said it was the perfect setup, he told investigators in a recorded statement that somehow leaked to the press. Reed was so busy playing secret billionaire that he never noticed what was happening right under his nose. She had Alan wrapped around her finger too. His idea to bring her into the fraud scheme, but she was the one who expanded it. I was reviewing this statement in my office when my phone rang. It was Sarah. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "Checking your email now." I opened the email she just sent, a series of screenshots of messages between Melissa and Alan discussing how to move company funds through shell corporations. One message stood out. "T still has no idea. As long as we keep the transfers under $500K each, the auditors he hired won't flag it. I've got Carter working on a new shell company in Singapore. More tax advantages. Dinner Friday to discuss?" Jesus, I muttered. She wasn't just aware of it. She was driving it. "There's more," Sarah said grimly. "They've been skimming from client accounts too. Small amounts so nobody would notice. We're talking millions over the past 3 years. Have you contacted the clients?" "Not yet. Legal is preparing a statement. But Thomas, this is going to get ugly." It did. Federal agents swarmed Haven Capital the next morning, carrying boxes of files and hard drives. Melissa was arrested at her yoga class, handcuffed in her leggings and tank top in front of her instructor and 12 other society wives. The photo made the front page of the New York Post. Alan was picked up at JFK, attempting to board a flight to Buenos Aires with a suitcase containing over $200,000 in cash. Carter turned state's evidence so fast it would have given a lesser prosecutor whiplash. Meanwhile, I was dealing with the fallout: panicked clients, nervous employees, board members demanding explanations. The company's stock plummeted 30% in 2 days. "We need to make a statement," Sarah insisted during an emergency meeting. "Something definitive that shows we're addressing this head on." "What do you suggest?" "Full transparency. Return any misappropriated funds to clients with interest. Replace the entire executive team if necessary. And," she hesitated. "And what?" "Rebrand completely. New name, new mission statement, new everything. Distance ourselves from Haven Capital entirely." The board unanimously agreed. By the end of the week, a plan was in motion. Haven Capital would cease to exist. In its place would rise Reed Financial Group. My name, front and center, no more hiding in the shadows. I visited Melissa at the detention center 3 days after her arrest. She looked nothing like the polished executive I'd been married to. In her orange jumpsuit, without makeup, hair flat and greasy, she seemed smaller, almost unrecognizable. "Why are you here?" she asked dully when I sat across from her. "To get answers." She stared at the table between us. "Enjoying your revenge?" "This isn't revenge, Melissa. It's justice." She laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the prosecutors offering me 20 years. You did this to yourself," I said flatly. "Every step of the way." "Is that why you came? To rub it in?" I leaned forward. "I came to ask one question. Why? You had everything: a successful career, wealth, respect. Why risk it all?" Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw complete honesty there. "Because it was never enough. Never. I grew up with nothing, Thomas. Dirt poor in Buffalo, wearing Goodwill clothes, watching my mother work 3 jobs and still get evicted. I swore I'd never be powerless again." "So you stole?" "I took what I deserved," she snapped. "Do you know what it's like to work twice as hard as men like Alan and Carter, only to get half the recognition? To be passed over because you don't golf or smoke cigars or have the right connections? So that justified stealing from clients, people who trusted you? They were just numbers on a spreadsheet, rich getting richer." I shook my head, disgusted. "And us? Was that just part of your scheme too?" Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe even regret. "Not at first. In the beginning it was real. You were different from the others. Brilliant but kind, not threatened by my ambition. When did it change? I don't know. Gradually, when I realized you were holding back parts of yourself, keeping secrets. She gave a bitter laugh. Ironic, isn't it? I was angry at you for hiding things while I was stealing millions. And Carter? Her face hardened. A means to an end. He had connections I needed, plus he was easy to manipulate. Men like him always are, so convinced of their own brilliance that they never see they're being used. I stood up. The divorce papers are being filed today. My lawyers will contact yours. Thomas, she said as I turned to leave, what's going to happen to me? I looked back at her, this stranger I'd shared a bed with for 5 years. You're going to prison, Melissa, for a long time. And when you get out, you'll never work in finance again. You could help me, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Speak to the prosecutors. Tell them I cooperated. Did you? I will. I'll tell them everything. Names, accounts, all of it. I studied her for a moment. I'll consider it, if you actually come clean. Hope flickered in her eyes. And us? Is there any chance? No, I cut her off. That's over. Completely and forever. I do love you, Thomas, she whispered. In my way. Your way isn't love, it's ownership. There's a difference. I turned away. We're done, Melissa. I didn't look back as the guard led me out.